From Buenos Aires, we are joined by Mr. Tobias Belgrano, the international relations researcher, to assess how Colombia's global reform bid fits into the policy tensions we unpacked yesterday. Mr. Belgrano, welcome to In Focus. Following our conversation yesterday, how does Petro's push for UN-led reform interact with the U.S. decertification we discussed? Mr. Belgrano, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Well, we had a conversation yesterday. Following it up, how does Petro's push for UN-led reform interact with the U.S. decertification?
Sorry, can you say it again?
Upon our conversation yesterday, sir, how does Petro's push for the UN-led reform interact with the U.S. decertification we've discussed?
Well, initially we've seen a lot of these diplomatic efforts traditionally in Latin America. It's not the first time a Latin American president tries to change the drug system or change the international way the drug system is managed internationally. We have the president of Evo Morales, the president of Bolivia. So I do think this is a diplomatic standpoint that Petro is trying to use, especially because the reform that's trying to be pushed by the UN, the idea is to include other members of society into the consulting groups of the drug trafficking issues. Also, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Colombia has informed and said that the cause of this attack of Trump against the Colombians and the Colombian government is not related to the drug war itself. It's rather more related to political reasons and because of the increasing militarization of the northern Caribbean region of South America.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you feel that Washington's criticism could weaken Bogota's authority at the UN, or can Colombia leverage its moral standing despite this rift?
So I do think Colombia is kind of isolated in this current moment, especially due to the increasing conflicts that we have internationally. Also, something that's been important and has been compared a lot in the recent years regarding this decertification is that it has been compared this current decertification with the 1990s decertification that increased and enhanced the power of the drug cartels in Colombia. In this case, it's very different because in the 1990s decertification, the funds against the drug war were definitely cut against, and this helped the drug industry to develop in Colombia during the 90s. In this particular case, the money has not been, the funds have not been stopped, interrupted from Washington D.C. That's why I think that this is more a political reason rather than a military reason. Mm-hmm. And I do think Colombia is kind of isolated in this case because there are more emerging matters internationally that the Colombian situation in Latin America, including Venezuela, which is much more critical in this moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about his domestic decisions? How might Petro's reversals from substitutions to renewed eradication affect the international trust in his agenda?
Well, this is also another of the reasons why this agenda, this UN agenda, is not led by Colombia. It's not that strong because internally Petro has a lot of contradictions in the way he manages the situation internally or domestically related to the drug cartels. Initially, he intended an approach when he intended to attack the cartels rather than the peasants, but after that, he's promising again using flights to kill all the coca peasant plantations, and this has a lot of incoherences and not a proper strategy to address the narco traffic situation in Colombia. So that's why Mr. Trump also is trying to impose a rougher perspective from from the Colombian government internally to stop the drug cartels. As we were mentioning, it has been imposed by force and by the military to Venezuela.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of the, uh, the positioning of Washington, is the U.S. waiver on aid enough to keep security cooperation intact while allowing policy experimentation?
Well, no, I don't think it's a good approach to move forward in this. If they cut funds, as I was mentioning during the 90s, that while the funds were cut against the drug trafficking war, this caused an increasing power of the drug cartels. And if Colombia, which is we were talking about yesterday in our previous conversation, increases its violence, and there is more, there's a increasing violence in Colombia, this might affect the migration crisis even further. Colombia, as I was mentioning yesterday, is a country which has had an increasing migrant population to the U.S. And if we see that the violence in Colombia gets more and more and more increasingly further, we might have a migration crisis even bigger from Colombia, from Latin America to the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Could Colombia's reformist leadership survive a change of administration at home or in Washington?
Well, a change in Washington would help a lot to the current Colombian government. Internally, a change, of course. I think that it would, if there's a right-wing government in Colombia, I think probably this decertification would be revised, and probably this would be in favor of the right-wing government, and probably Colombia would benefit if there's a change in the administration. Let's remember that Trump has a political approach rather than a diplomatic approach. The idea is, if you're a friend, everything. If you're an enemy, we'll just force our agenda to you with our leverage as we are the U.S., as it happened with Mexico, as it happened sometimes with Venezuela, and other countries that were more hostile to the U.S., and it's happening currently to Brazil, which is intending now to talk with Mr. Trump regarding his tariffs. So I think that if Colombia gets a new leadership, probably things will be much easier for the Colombian government.
Mm-hmm. Well, keeping in mind the strong U.S. influence globally, what about regional actors such as Mexico, you've mentioned, or the European Union? Would they be ready to support Colombia's bid, or will they align with the U.S. caution?
Well, as I was mentioning, Mexico, it's an actor that has been a little bit disciplined by the U.S. despite the left-wing approach of President Sheinbaum. There have been some kind of disciplines. For example, the recent tariff of Mexico against Chinese cars. It's one of the U.S. agenda items that have been imposed to the Mexicans. Also, more border controls from Mexican authorities to prevent migration from Central America to passing through Mexico and going to the U.S. border. So yes, the U.S. I think Mexico has a higher stance in stake to support Colombia in this current state of affairs, because, as I was mentioning, the northern part of South America is now a hotspot in the region.
Mm-hmm. Well, what lessons can other producer states draw from Colombia's attempt to internationalize drug reform while navigating U.S. pressure?
Well, I think it's hard to move forward in reform when you are in a moment of political and regional weakness with the U.S. in front. It's difficult also in this case, in this current context where the White House has a lot of leverage and it's imposing a lot of its leverage in the Western hemisphere at least. It's more difficult for countries like Colombia to leverage or manage negotiations with the European Union, while the U.S. is pressuring them with tariffs, and probably it will impose the U.S. will. Recently, I was reading a paper regarding Colombian history, which said strong powers do what they want and small countries do what they must.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that there is a need for a new consensus on drugs and balancing development, health, and security? Do you see the current UN process as a real opening for change or just another round of debate in Vienna?
Well, I do think there's a need to change in the approach, and many countries are perceiving this that the fight against the war against drugs, it's not been helpful in the recent years. It's not currently working. The new resolution has interesting points that includes members of of the society rather than also experts in the matter, which is interesting to have a most holistic or wide approach to the war against drugs and how to manage the drug war.
Mm-hmm. From Buenos Aires, Mr. Tobias Belgrano, the international relations researcher, thank you very much